The panelists for today are Counselor Bob Ocelot, and he is the president of the Indianapolis City County Council. It is Maya Shiprush Billy, and she is the deputy commissioner of the Division of Supplier Diversity at the Indiana Department of Administration. And then we have someone new on the scene. Joseph Lee is contract compliance officer for the Office of Minority and Women Business Development for the City of Indianapolis. And we have Adrian Russell, who is Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Procurement for Shield Sexton. So I'm glad you all are here today, and I look forward to learning more about what's going to happen moving forward. So I'm going to start with introducing each of our panelists, and they will have an opportunity to provide some background, take good notes, and make sure if you have questions, again, put them in the chat so we can get to those afterwards. Our first panelist is Counselor Ocelot. He is chairman of the council's Rules and Public Policy Committee and serves on its Public Works Committee. He has worked extensively with community groups, civic organizations, and other public sector officials in the business community on the expansion of work opportunities, skills training, and disadvantaged and small business financing. I'm going to go off script because he's doing some pretty cool things that I'm involved in as well. He is part of the Indianapolis Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And that's so important because we always talk about workforce and how it's so important to have equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we look at businesses that partner as an extension of the workforce. So the goals that we have for the people who actually work for an entity, anyone who's working on our behalf should also resonate those same goals. And the work that you're doing is really going to make be clear on what is important and how we can work together to make it better for everyone. So thank you. You can share your comments.
So great. Thank you very much, Holly, for the introduction and for to my fellow panelists this afternoon. Let me start by saying years ago, I owned a small minority business, an architecture firm. And I saw firsthand the challenges that minority women business enterprises faced. I saw it firsthand. Larger, more established practices that we would partner with were often bad actors or often unfair when we would partner together in for example, a publicly funded project. The enforcement powers, what I did see was that the enforcement powers were not set up to ensure that the intentions of the NWBE programs were enforced, which basically means that the growth and sustainability of small businesses was impacted. And we were impacted. And realizing that there wasn't anyone who could make that, make that change, even when it was reported, there was just not enough horsepower to get it done. So we had a small, but we had a solid organization. We had talent, talented architects, talented capacity. And we had gone after a few publicly funded projects to fill the goals. And we saw zero work, zero utilization of our workforce and our talents, which then translates into $0. But folks had partnered and sort of used our name and our designation as a means of getting the job. Well, that's a bad actor, and that's acting in bad faith. So it was obvious, I think, even then, that enforcement powers need to be put in place to better ensure that the goals of increased utilization of our minority, our women, business enterprises, veteran business enterprises, disabled-owned, business enterprises, was accomplished. So when we got to this point, and especially last year, it was, we're going to do something about this. It is not enough to have the intention. You have to have something behind it. And so the authority for achieving the objectives of the utilization plan have been strengthened through the work of the City County Council and the Mayor's office to ensure that there is tooth. And I want to give just a brief example. we can see it happen and do nothing about it, or we as a city can be proactive, as we're trying to be with GARE, as we were with proposal, what was it, 231 last year, and work to develop and grow our businesses. Because if we're not doing it, we're not doing the work to really establish strong, solid, minority and women business enterprises. It's just not going to happen. And let me give you a quick example. You're out at the airport and you're doing tremendous work out there. Really, you are doing tremendous work. A fantastic example, especially with your utilization numbers. But years ago, I put this under the umbrella of, we've got to be intentional about it. Years ago, when the new airport was first being designed, we got an opportunity to participate, or we asked for an opportunity to participate as architects. So we had about 20 people in our firm. It was the chairman of the board, Lacey Johnson. It was the program director, John Kish, who said to us, now, based on your capacity, right? This is almost $1 billion project. You can do about this much work, right? And we're happy to try to help you to achieve it. Or with other firms like yours, you can do this much work. And it was that sort of intentional opportunity, intentional sort of pairing, intentional just advice that made all the difference. So instead of us doing a small $10 to $15 million job, we ended up with a $103 million job. And you know what the fees on that come out to be? Those are solid 7 figures. That then gave us the opportunity to grow more, to get more staff, and then to start doing work overseas because we had horsepower and capacity. And it's that kind of thing that I've taken with me. And now that we're in this place, how do we help other businesses, being the city? How do we help other businesses by us being intentional, to either mentor, marry firms, and how do we get the horsepower and the tooth behind the office to say, if you're a bad actor, we're cutting you out. We don't have to ask anyone else for permission. We will cut you out when you have shown that you act in bad faith. And that would have been, I think, tremendous 20 years ago when we started having these issues, or 15 years ago when we started having these issues, when I became aware of these issues. So, I'll leave it at that because I know there's probably time for Q&A. I don't want to hog all this, but I just wanted to say this is where I started from and why we are moving in this direction.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, President Ocelot. And just want to recap some things. He talked about growth and sustainability, and he talked about moving from intent to being intentional. And you can have the intent to drive growth and sustainability, but unless you're being intentional about the work that it takes and taking action, there'll be no outcomes. So the other thing you touched on, it's a new version of see something, say something. And so again, going slightly off script, but many times after opportunities have passed by, vendors will talk. We need people to talk real time. We don't want you to talk about anything that you feel is discrimination or an inequitable process. We need you to say something because we can't change what we don't know. So I know everyone here is listening, and you talked about bad actors acting in bad faith. If we don't know that's what's happening, it's difficult to drive that enforcement. So to the minority, women, veteran, disadvantaged small business community, you're hearing a lot of people say, talk to us. I know sometimes there's a fear that you may not get another opportunity from that vendor, but if they are not treating you well, do you really want one? And so we've got to work together as a community so we can make it better for everyone. So President Ocelot, thank you very much. And I hope everyone remembers, we don't want bad actors acting in bad faith, and please let us know so we can leverage our programs to do something about it. Our next panelist is Maya Shiprus-Vili. She is the Deputy Commissioner of the Indiana Division of Supplier Diversity of the Indiana Department of Administration. Her focus is on minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. They do certification as well as compliance around their procurement and contract initiatives. With that, Maya.
Thank you, Holly. I think, Counselor, you gave me a good head start and very good discussion points. I actually wrote down intention or being intentional plus leadership support equals success for us. I think some of the misperception and conception about our program is that people forget that it exists because there's a law. And the law established the Division of Minority and Women's Business Enterprises at the state of Indiana. And July 1st, 2019, our division was renamed as the Division of Supplier Diversity because we got our Indiana Veteran-Owned Small Business Program back to our division. So now we represent minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. And the law specifically defines that it is the state of Indiana's goals, right? That we have to, or at least have to make a good faith effort to meet, and in our case, ideally exceed those goals. And that's what people forget, especially sometimes when we talk about, and I will touch upon the Governor's Commission on Supplier Diversity. Everybody looks at it like it's IDOA or Indiana Department of Administration goals, but we just administer. It is all the state agencies' responsibility to meet and exceed these goals, as well as the state educational institutions. And I think that's the big piece of it as well. We have, our goals are being mirrored by 7 state educational institutions. That's Ball State, Indiana University, Indiana Southern University, Indiana State University, University of Southern Indiana. We have Purdue, we have Ivy Tech, and Vincent. So they're good and big 7 institutions that also mirror our goals. So when and if there are not enough contracting opportunities with the state, then we also direct our vendors, minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses to those opportunities with the SEIs or state education institutions. What I would like to underline, and I will talk about it during our disparity study findings, so I don't want to steal your thunder, Holly, but the certification is one of the key components, just like with the city of Indianapolis and the state of Indiana, because what we found after the disparity studies that most of the vendors that took minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses that had contracting opportunities with the state of Indiana and state education institutions were certified with the state. So that's part one of our major first functions. And in that area, although we have the law and the regulations as though we always try to refine the process that is customer faced and customer friendly. And as we were going through the pandemic, I am proud to say that with the leadership of our commissioner and our wonderful information and technology office, we were able to establish electronic certification. And that was a game changer for most of our vendors who don't have to mail their paperwork now. And sometimes there was a sensitivity as well to mail in their taxes or confidential information that obviously we retain and stays with us. But still, it's not just a computer away. So in a click away, you just upload your information. So if you are out there who have not or are thinking about certification and think that this is a difficult process, we just made that easy for you. As of end of February, beginning of March, we switched to e-certification. So while that's good news for, well, it's good news for us as well, but I just wanted to tell you that that caused just a lot of certification applications to be submitted, which is good for us. The more the merrier. That is certainly our job security, but that is just how easy it became. Holly, you also talked about a contract compliant. That is one of the biggest pieces that we are very proud of that we did under this leadership of the current IDOA commissioner. We as the division didn't have contract compliance person. And as you might imagine, there are a lot of hundreds and hundreds of state of Indiana contracts that are either underway or just about to be out in the street. And that needs a lot of compliance and a lot of effort and concentrated effort to make sure that crimes do not conveniently forget to meet their commitments. So at that time of the contract, it's binding. It is not a goal anymore. It is not an aspirational goal anymore. It is their contractual obligation. So right now we have a team of three, we are 3 women strong. Of course, you need an army of women, right? Or men to monitor all state contracts, but that's more than nothing. So we are very proud of building this contract compliance team. And what also is important to note is that and you mentioned Councilor Teeth, having teeth, and we were honestly asked many times, like, does your program have teeth? And earlier, while these programs are not new, you still need that leadership buy-in. You need the governor, you need the mayor, you need the commissioner, you need all the stakeholders to basically support us and take us to the next level. Programs are here, but now it's the intention and it's that leadership buy-in. And we are fortunate that not just our office, but now at the general council, how the process works is that, as you might imagine, multi-million-dollar contracts have signature process, right? And none of those contracts are being awarded right now without our division's review. So kind of like what the city of Indianapolis, and I know your project specific and you have lots of construction projects as well. That's not the case so much with the state because we're mostly professional services and goods and supplies. However, we have a chance now to look and stop before the contracts are being awarded to see if the contract language contains those commitments that how they responded at the time won the big state contract. And that was a game changer because we find sometimes intentional, unintentional errors that conveniently for some reason our subcontractors are always missed. So we find those errors, but sometimes also we find out that during the contract negotiation phase, something happened and changed for the subcontractors. And then we ask the right questions and no change to the contract can happen letter to say so that we approved or disapproved this request. So that's a big game changer that now we see on the state contract, and that's again coordinated effort from the leadership as well, not just the office, right? At the same time, that was our second role, and the third role is business development and outreach. We can sit here and create the best laws and best regulations and best policies. But if the vendor community is not aware of them, then we are not doing a good job. So our third function is business development outreach. During COVID, we had over 42 webinars and we talked about all the stuff that the PPP, accessing capital, what to do during COVID. And we've had our colleagues from all over the place to bring in resources for our businesses that were suffering during the pandemic. So if you don't remember anything about what our discussion will be, just remember that there are 3 functions that we oversee at the Division of Supplier Diversity: that certification of minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses, contract compliance once you are a prime or a subcontractor on the state of Indiana contracts, and business development outreach.
Awesome. Thank you. I always like to do a little bit of recap, and your comments were directly in line of President Ocelot. But what I liked, what you led with, was the leadership support. And we talk a lot about accountability. So when we talk about bad actors acting in bad faith, I think it's important for people to understand that leadership is committed. And we talk about goals a lot, but the next phase is commitment. So once there's a goal in place, and there's a commitment made, once that is inked, you can follow up on that and make sure things are happening. And then there's the ultimate, which is attainment, and utilization, which is also the ultimate, which is inclusion. So just think about, there's a goal set. It's not set to make things complex. It's an intentional component of inclusion. Then the commitment allows us to monitor, is what I heard you say, and let leadership drive accountability. And then the N is inclusion, which is utilization, which you talked about, which is actual contract opportunities and dollars that allow people to hire the women and diverse people in our community. And again, I just want to reiterate that is the ultimate goal of everything. And you also touched on moving from intent to intentional action when you said a goal is aspirational. But when you move that to, you begin to think of your components and compliance, that's contract award. And so again, knowing that our state is being very intentional and then has leadership commitment to hold people accountable. And again, you talked about your role is to administer. So certification does not guarantee you're going to get an opportunity. What it does is it ensures that we're helping the community that we're targeting. And I know this is always a sticky subject, but there are people who try to take advantage of minority and women business. So there's an accountability where you're administering the certification to ensure there are genuine minority, women, veteran, and disadvantaged businesses and not pass through. So I know a lot of times we don't want to talk about it, but I think it's important that we want to help businesses that are also hiring other minority, women, and veterans so that it cascades and we're not bringing in fronts so we can count a number. The goal is just the first step, but it's kind of cyclical for goals, commitment, and attainment. So thank you very much.
Precisely. Thank you.
All righty. I would like to introduce Joseph Lee.
Thank you.
And he has a very exciting story specific to how his role has come about because of a disparity study. So prior to joining the Office of Minority Women and Business Development with the City of Indianapolis, Joe worked as a buyer for the Office of Finance, Management, Purchasing Division. That's really important because he knows the process.
Yes.
And so as we work to try to identify if there are systems that create inequities, he knows firsthand and will be able to influence. In his new role, he will champion the mission as well as serving the needs for the city's procurement. So we're excited and want to hear a little bit about how did the disparity study impact your new opportunity?
Well, thank you all for having me. One of the things that the disparity study did, it created the position of the contract compliance officer, and that's me. And so I am very thankful and proud to be in this, because as I say to folks all the time, we need to do the right thing. And if we're not doing the right thing, then that's going to be a challenge down the road. So one of the things that I told our former director, Camille Blunt, and our current interim director, Fahad Beg, when I started was that I want to do education first and foremost. I come with that purchasing background. I have seen and heard lots of stories about folks and, trying to get contracts with the city, trying to work with the city, state government, whatever the case is. And, there is always opportunity. Everyone says that the system's rigged, but there are bidding opportunities out there every single day. You have to know how to add advantage of them and help move yourself forward. With that, there are those bad actors when it comes to the compliance side. And in the year plus that I have been on board, we have had those conversations. And if you're on a conference call with me, one of the things that you hear me say is that's not going to be a good look, and that's not going to end well. And I never want to have that this has not ended well conversation. And so my goal is to educate first, educate second, and then have that compliance conversation last. Some of the biggest changes that have come about because of the strengthening of the ordinance, not only myself in the contract compliance role, but we are holding bidders and city, county agencies and departments responsible for good faith effort. When you're going to work on a contract with a certified XPE subcontractor, have you done the good faith effort? Have you not just went to the list and called somebody once,
Right.
but have you dug deep
Correct.
into this process? You can't just email, you can't just make one phone call. And then if you're not getting a response, something's not going right, bring us in because we're here to help you.
Mhm.
My first job should be helping you get to where you need to be. And we're having that conversation literally daily.
Mhm.
And so one of the first conversations that I had in that realm was Kite Development was starting a new project. And they had always heard of Browning and Davis and Associates at 16 Tech. A great success story for minority or XBE utilization. They had over 50% on that project. Kite Development said, we want to know what Browning's doing. Can you hook us up with a phone call? We got them together, and now Kite is saying, we want to be like Browning. And that is the best story ever. So 1 year later, they're getting darn close to being like Browning has done in the past. So good faith effort has to be that deep dive, as I say, and no longer can you just do the basics and walk away and then say, we don't have XBE utilization, sorry. The other thing that I think is just fantastic is that we're now asking city, county government. So we have always asked city, county government to look to XBEs, but now it's a full court press in saying from council committees to the council to when someone sends a requisition to buy some goods or services or whatever the case is, now OFM and the purchasing division says, where is your good faith effort? If you're going to buy widgets, who on our XBE list can supply widgets? Those agencies and departments have to list that in that requisition. That's never been done before.
Awesome.
That has always been left to purchasing, and purchasing really doesn't have the time to get it done. They have tried for years. I have been on the front lines of that in making sure that we email, that we contact. I was doing that good faith effort. Now we're backing up, asking city government to step up to the plate and do what we've been asking developers and general contractors to do for many years. Where's your good faith effort? We're only less than 1 year into it, but I'm sure as we move along, this will grow. Then obviously, as I said, my role as compliance, not only making sure that the developers and the general contractors do their part, but also XBEs are doing what they are supposed to be doing, because sometimes that doesn't happen, and that is unfortunate. One of the conversations that I had with someone one time was, you are a XBE and you purchase goods from a non-XBE when there's 3 XBEs that could have sold you those goods. What are you doing? Think about what you're doing. So first, second tier. And then one of the last things I will throw out, which it is just general, is, if every city, county agency, if every business in the city of Indianapolis took some time to look at our list of certified XBEs to buy your office supplies, your cleaning supplies, your lawn and landscape, your office cleaning, your PVC pipe, your whatever the case is, I would probably not need a job because XBEs would be busy.
Absolutely.
And that has to be something that we all have to push towards. So that's what I have going on.
That's
Okay.
awesome. That is
Thank you.
awesome.
Well, you heard it first from a person with extensive procurement experience. Take the time to look at the list.
Absolutely.
There are multiple lists. There's the
Yes.
city list. There's the state list. There's the mid-state list. There's the NDOT disadvantaged list. All of those are available if you reach out to those organizations. And so I really appreciate that. And I'm sure the minority woman, veteran, disadvantaged, and small business community appreciates it. But sometimes as a procurement professional, I think you will agree, you're trying to move so fast
Correct.
and make things happen. But I think that's great advice to say, just pause, take time to look at the list. The other three words that I use all the time is access, consideration, also leads to inclusion. So you talked about outreach. I think we do an awesome job all across the community of letting people know how to get access to opportunities. Where I think we're working on together is how do we do better? You talked about education, helping them navigate through those process. And that's the participation and consideration. And if we work together collectively, we're going to get outcomes. So you also talked about a GFE. And I just want to make sure everyone understands that a good faith effort is typically required whenever the stated goals are not met. Be advised that people provide those. So if you know you're not meeting the goal that was in the solicitation, we're going to ask the question. So if you can proactively provide that, we can start the process. And I appreciate what you said, is it's not a check the box. We're all trying to create economic impact.
Exactly.
And so what you have to do is make a genuine effort. And that's what the compliance is doing, is making sure we made a genuine effort, not you did something to meet a number, but you're really trying to provide opportunities. And the nice thing about the GFE is if you've done your due diligence and it doesn't work out, I would say everybody is very reasonable. So, sometimes you can identify the perfect XBE and they're busy, but that means you need to call some other ones, and sometimes the cost might not be competitive. And if you pulled them in, your bid would be too high. One of the challenges, and I know President Ocelot, you know very well, sometimes you cannot lowball yourself, and if it's not meaningful for the small business, and sometimes they are come at a premium because they can't leverage, and that's where we can help. And if multiple agencies are using the same business, then we put them in a position where they can leverage and offer different pricing. But you've got to take the time to look at the list and understand why those discrepancies exist. And through GFEs, we can figure out how we can best work together. So last but not least, we have Mr. Adrian Russell. Besides his day job, he's an inspirational speaker, a mentor, a musician. So he might, I don't know if you're going to play or sing
Not today.
some of your presentation.
Not today.
And something that I find real interesting is it says a visionary. So that's something we definitely need in this space. Adrian is also the founder of Russell's Building Camp, which introduces children of all ages to the world of building and inspiring them to use their hands and minds to create a better future. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to say that I commend all of the panelists as well as our moderator. This is awesome. And it's a great discussion already. I also wanted to compliment Joe on the beard. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
When I came into the room, I said, whoa, okay. But so many good things have been said. And I'll say that, my mind goes back to, 10 years ago, I graduated Ball State University, and I started out on my first construction project with a very large construction firm. And I started out on the New Wishart Eskenazi Hospital project, and that budget exceeded $1 billion. And I'll never forget, stepping out onto that project that summer and being the only African-American male that I can recall on the entire campus amongst hundreds of team members. And as the days and weeks and months went by, I better and better understood the landscape of the industry in which I entered. And that's just a simple reality. And I think that all of us in some way, shape, or form, we all can relate to some of the hardships, challenges, and adversities that we face as individuals simply trying to navigate through this industry, much less a business owner attempting to navigate and successfully run a business in this market and in this landscape. And the fact of the matter is, so many things they've been done through the years, and we can look around, and some would say that the industry is no better today as it was 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. President Ocelot mentioned bad actors. And one thing that came to my mind is the smoke and mirrors that are so prevalent in our industry and in business practices as it pertains to giving minority firms, minority businesses, small minority businesses, fair and adequate opportunities in order to build their business and in order to succeed. And we mentioned the list. And since my time coming in as Shield Sexton, I realized that some of this is not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It just simply comes down to intent, wanting to be intentional and deliberate to change the way things have always been done and to give our minority brothers and our minority sisters a fair shake and an opportunity to prove themselves, and to simply change your attitude, to change your disposition and believe that they are capable of performing the task at hand. Coming into Shield Sexton, having the opportunity to sit down with, project managers and individuals that hand out contracts, one question that was asked, time and time again is, where is the list? Who's on the list? How do we know who the, minority firms, who are they and where are they? So one thing that I'm very proud of is that we as a team, we've sat down in these past months and we have compiled a very comprehensive list that breaks out all of the state and city minority contractors and minority firms. And it's a filterable list. So we're able to go through and filter by whether it's a minority business, a woman-owned, a veteran-owned, disabled, so forth and so on. And then also we're able to break out by scope of work, to where we're looking for supplies, or if we're looking for a painter or an earth worker, a steel shop, or an electrician, we're able to go through and selectively distinguish through the list. And that helps us be intentional. So when there's a project or when there's an opportunity at hand, we're able to go through that list and very intentionally select and shop for who it is that we're looking for. I'm seeing that we're lacking intentionality. We're lacking intentionality. And it's that simple. And for me to get here to where I am today, I know that as an individual, I'm here because I had an advocate. I'm here because I had an advocate. And now that I am in this position with Shield Sexton, being one of the largest construction firms in the state of Indiana and a leader in this market, I understand the importance of these firms, these small minority businesses. They need an advocate. They need an advocate in the room where we can go beyond smoke and mirrors. We all know I'll say the game for lack of a better term, but we know the games that are played to where, I can bring you into the office and, I can sit you down. We can exchange business cards, offer you a cup of coffee or a bottle of water, and I know 45 minutes to an hour, I can entertain you. And after this meeting, I'm not going to give you any real opportunity. I mean, we know the games that are played. We've all faced those. But at the same hand, I understand that now in the room, I have the charge of serving as an advocate for these individuals, to where when a job or a bid opportunity does come up, I can go into, an office or knock on the door and say, hey, did you see that email from that individual? Did you see that email from that firm? Did you follow up? Are we going to give them an opportunity? Or when I hear of an opportunity, I can go to that firm and say, hey, I think this will perfectly suit you. And then I can go to leadership within Shield Sexton and I can advocate for the success and for the opportunity. We see so many disparities, and I know we've already mentioned some, but during my time as a project manager, my background is in project management. Prior to joining Shield Sexton, I spent over 10 years in project management. I've worked in 13 different states managing construction projects. So needless to say, I've experienced and I've seen quite a bit. But it's no secret that this industry, it is historically sorely lacked by way of diversity. And at Shield Sexton, our motto is we build for people who expect more. But I think that we can take that thinking one step further. Not only should we build for people who expect more, but we should charge ourselves to build with people who expect more. And some of the disparities that, small minority businesses that they face, I mean, it starts one with majority contractors and vendors holding prejudicial views on the minority firm's ability to complete a job. There are great difficulties in small minority businesses attempting to break through and enter the marketplace. Bid opportunities are not shared and clearly communicated in a timely fashion, giving small minority businesses the time to successfully compile a bid. There's limited access to capital. We all know about the inequalities when it comes to loan distribution. Small minority businesses lacking the funds to pursue larger projects. There's unclear contract terms, or a small minority business with their personnel overloaded. They might not have the time, or they may not have the individual with the expertise to comb through cloudy contract terms and make sure that they enter a good deal. Or they may face pressure where they're under the pressure to turn a contract around without having the time to really go through and see the terms of which they're agreeing to. Another major impediment is the unpractical bonding requirements. Prevents any small minority businesses from going after larger contracts, larger projects. And lastly, we all know about the delays in payments. And I've seen this in my time in the industry. The delays in payments that place small minority businesses at a great financial risk. Those are just a few of the many disparities that small minority businesses face. And each and every one of those issues, they all carry their own adverse trickle-down effects that would be detrimental to any business anywhere. So a company such as Shield Sexton, as a leader in this industry, as a leader in this market, we understand that if we're intentional, we can mentor, we can help to cultivate, we can help to really guide small firms and give them a big brother, if you will. Give them a big brother and a partner there. We already have the resources. We already have the personnel. We already have the expertise to where we can successfully help our smaller minority counterparts, the minority firms across the city, and we can champion them, whether it be in advocacy, in a reference, or even just taking them in and giving them the time to understand our business practices, to understand the best practices, to review their financials, to show them how we estimate, how we schedule. It's really just intentionality and being deliberate, and most importantly, understanding that once we, individuals such as myself and all of us that are here on this panel, once we get into the room, it's important and imperative that we serve as an advocate for minority businesses so that they can get the fair chance to succeed.
Sure you don't want to sing?
No, I don't.
Well, thank you, Adrian. And I think everyone can see the different perspectives. So you're hearing from government who's just committed to the leadership of the city. You're hearing from agencies that do certification as well as monitor compliance. And you're hearing from, in our vernacular, a prime that is striving to create opportunity. So I think President Ocelot, you started off well with saying shifting from intent to being intentional, but through action. You talked about my accountability and the stress on the leadership. Joseph, you talked about take the time. I mean, it's as simple as that. Leverage the resources that are out there. And then Adrian, you brought it home and saying advocacy. We have to be advocates, and it's on both sides. So it's not just what are the corporations that put the goals in place, but it's also you talked about the XVEs and what they can do to help. So I think it should be apparent that working together, we can make a difference. And now what we want to do is kind of focus in on what does that have to do with the disparity study? One of the things that I talked about earlier is that a disparity study looks at the availability of businesses. And one of the things we really need to focus on, it is all inclusive. So it's not just looking at the percentage of total businesses and then what is the breakout of minority businesses. It looks at the dollars spent with those businesses. So for an example, you can have an awesome percentage and it can be one business that's impacted. And I call that the few good men category. That does not drive economic impact if you only have a few businesses that are driving that percentage very high. And then we've got to look at the number, so the total number of businesses. And so what I think disparity studies do a really good job of is look at the percentage, it looks at the dollars, and it looks at the numbers that are being impacted. And I'm going to take a point of privilege, but we want all of those to be positive, because if one of those is good and the other ones are not, then there is still a disparity. And so that's what we're working together to achieve. So I'm going to look, so bear with me, at the Q&A. And it says, it's really small. I don't know, Tony, if you can help.
I can help make that happen.
Thank you,
No
Tony.
problem whatsoever. We can do that.
So I'm sure through IBE, all of our information will be accessible. I'm speaking on behalf of you, Adrian. The rest of us are all public. So via our websites and things like that, so we can coordinate making sure participants receive information on how to contact each one of us.
Can I talk about something real quick?
Absolutely.
You know, there's a new project going up at 38th and Sheridan, not 38th and Sherman, but 38th and Sheridan over on the northeast side. And it's with Cook Medical and Goodwill Industries. There is not a dollar of city funds in that project. And they have made the commitment to have 100% minority participation on that project. So when I have someone call me and say, you know, we're not going to get there, we're not going to meet the goals, we need to start talking about a good faith waiver. We need to start having that conversation now. My first question is, you're not doing the deep dive. You're not being intentional about what you need to be doing. And if you can't do that, then we're going to have challenges, because we know that when you are intentional, Keela Darden with the Darden Group.
I couldn't wait to
and-
plug her.
Yeah, you know, she has went through that list several times, and she's had those conversations. And they're striving for 100%. Let's just say, for instance, they come in at 95% or 90%. That is to be commended and recognized and uplifted to everyone else who says, we can't get there. We can't meet the so-called minimum of 27%. Well, we all know that that's not the truth. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Can I add something?
You sure can.
But Akila, I mean, she's awesome. She set the goal that we will meet 100%.
Yes.
Where we see projects where there's a claim that we couldn't meet 10%.
Correct.
We couldn't meet 10%, yet Akila, starting out, the clear stated goal was we will meet 100%. And so thus far they have it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, if I may, I can add that too. You mentioned the dreaded word waiver, right? That's the one that we do not like to give. And well, at the same time, though, I always say, Holly, like you mentioned, if you come into us and if you just couldn't really, you made those good faith efforts, but you really couldn't find anyone. I always say it's hard to believe this, but we do have a common sense, and we do have common sense when it
Yes.
comes to reviewing those good faith efforts and saying that, okay, either you really tried, everybody was busy, or geographic area was in the way, because we do serve the entire state of Indiana. And then there were some other factors that we see that good faith effort was made, but the goals were not achieved. So to prime, it is so encouraging, Adrian, that you are talking from the prime perspective, right? From the contractor's perspective, who has a person that is now taking care of, or is the advocate, as we call ourselves. We're big sisters and big brothers when it comes to supplier diversity for our subcontractors, because nobody does, nobody will. And that we are the only ones. Also, although I always say we're not a party of a contract, we are not the ones signing that contract with the prime and the subcontractor. We are still their advocates. And that's why they have to come through us and have some of those uncomfortable and those discussions. Joe, you were mentioning, like, I don't want to end the conversation with, you don't want to do that, or this conversation didn't go well, right? Unfortunately, we have to. We have to when it doesn't, when the prime comes in and says, I just won't or can't there's lots of, as we call, excuses. And I always say there's nothing you can tell me that I haven't already heard. So we can just, just continue without those excuses. Let us try to help you. And here's the list, and here are all the resources. So I think it's important to know for the prime community that we do have common sense. We look at those good faith efforts, and then we say, okay, yes, we see, and you get your waiver, which is very disliked word in our reality.
Well, I think when we think about the disparity study and you talk about waivers, there's a direct correlation because the data is there. So I would suggest it is a long read, both the city and the states. And NDOT also has disparity studies for disadvantaged businesses, but the data is there. So we talk about demographics a lot, but if you really want to understand where there is availability as well as where there's not. So if there was a need for a waiver, you should be able to go to the disparity study and see that there's no available companies. That's legitimate. The other thing is if you're thinking about opening up a business and you're trying to say where is a place that's not saturated, you go to a disparity study, because not only does it show utilization, which is what we spend a lot of our time talking about, but it shows availability where our community has opportunity and there's no ethnic or racial or gender diversity there. So I'm working for the airport, but if I was starting my own business, the disparity study would be one of the first places I would go, because one, I can learn about who my competition is and what my competition is, and I can learn about what the opportunities are, but I can also see where there are gaps that, I could do that too. And so I think it's important when we talk about GFEs and waivers, that's the first place we can go to kind of validate, is that an area where there was no availability? So just trying to make sure we pull things back into the disparity study. So one of the things we haven't mentioned is if you go to the city's website or you go to the state's website, you can get access to the current or past disparity studies that are there. And this morning we shared for the city, it's been about 25 years since a disparity study was done. And so moving forward, I know there have been some things that have been put in place to set a schedule. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that at all, about how important it is to review, because the landscape of businesses change.
Absolutely. So it had been a couple of decades since we've done one previously, right? And we need to know the current market, and it needs to be, updated. We've got to be almost in real time. We cannot rely on years past, and we need to have that information immediately available, or relatively immediately available. So what we did put into this is that every 5 years, we will conduct a new utilization study, so that everyone knows, because what you said right now is really key. How do I know which industries I should maybe get involved in? I want to be an entrepreneur. Do I want to be like people who are going after the same job, or do I want a unique position where I stand to really dominate that position, right? Let's be frank, that's what business is about. Well, we don't know that until we know, where do we have a void? Where do we not have businesses that are dealing with this? And so that was why it was important to make sure that we required a utilization study every 5 years. We should never lag a decade or 2 decades.
A lot changes.
A lot changes. So, that is now one of the other items that we moved forward with last year.
Awesome. And then Joe, I know with the your new position, one of the things working at the airport that I was asked, and I know the other Muni Corps as well as agencies have been asked to come up with an inclusion plan. And so you guys provided a template. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as well? So this goes to what is happening moving beyond the study, and what intentional action, not intent, is happening. So if you could speak to that.
So for the first time ever, if I'm not mistaken, not only the city, counties, and agencies, but the municipal corporations, the airport authority, Marion County Building Authority, Indianapolis Housing, Marion County Public Library, those type, Eskenazi Health and Hospital. Excuse me, everyone was asked to take a look and what are you going to do to be intentional? What are you going to do to help close this gap with your spending? Look at where you've been spending, take that deep dive and go into what you do and be able to answer to the council, number one, but ultimately to the citizens. This is what we're going to do to try to be more inclusive of minorities and women, veterans, and disabled owned businesses. And here is one of the things that I think has been just kind of funny, but I can't count the number of agencies and departments that have been spending money with an XBE vendor that they didn't know was an XBE vendor. Or it's someone they've been doing business with for years through the bid process. Folks have been winning bids. There's a car dealer in Southern Indiana who knew was a veteran-owned business. No, excuse me, minority-owned business.
Mhm.
The city of Indianapolis has been buying cars through the bid process from this company for years. No one knew. So this has got everyone in city government, if you're buying something in the municipal corporations, if you're buying, I mean, I get calls from Indianapolis Housing all the time. Hey, we're looking to piggyback on this contract. We're looking to put this out. Do you have anyone on your list? We didn't find it. We want to make sure that we did not miss anything. And that to me is what the disparity study, what the agencies and departments have been asked to do is when you don't know, ask. Try to figure it out, use that list, but use us as a resource.
Right.
And so this year, when they come back for their budget hearings, they're going to have even better conversations than they had last year. And then into 2022, looking to 2023, I want the counselors to be asking even more questions and doing that deep dive on these agencies and these departments and these municipal agencies. You have had a year, 2 years, 3 years to do this. What are you doing? When you're spending taxpayer dollars, are you making this happen? Are you working your plan? Did you just write it and it's just stuff that you put on,
Yep, absolutely.
on paper? No, this has to be stuff that you're carrying out, that you're looking at 5 days a week when you're in the office. So that's one of the biggest things that I think has happened. Some folks, when you put that in front of them, they were like, what is this? Well, now they've learned.
If I may say, so last year was the very first year that the council required that of every agency, every department, every municipal corporation, that you were going to present your budget and you were going to identify where you were spending your money, how much of your staff, how much of your spend is with an XBE company, a minority or women, or a veteran owned or disabled owned business. So last year set the benchmark, right? This is where we start. We just finished the questions that we're going to ask every single agency to report back. Where do you stand? So based on where you were last year, where are you today, and how close are you towards reaching a reasonable goal? So don't worry. That's already that the whole idea of this was for accountability.
Yes.
All of us basically are under microscopes because we deal with public money. And the main thing is then, are we addressing and are we spending that money in a way that benefits everyone in the community or as many people in the community as is possible? And so working with GARE, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, working with our municipal corporations like the Airport Authority, who I'll say again, has led this charge in, amazingly in the municipal corporations in their spend. It's got to be accountable.
Yeah.
We will ask those questions and people have to answer them. So they have the questions now in order to be able to answer them as factually and as with as much detail as is possible. We all have to be accountable.
Exactly. And to Maya's point, we all have common sense. There's going to be those times where you can't work with AXBE because there are none.
Right.
But we want you to tell us that there are none.
We want you to look.
We want you to look. And if you do that, then we're all good.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, it talks about being reasonable, due diligence. And again, we keep talking about goals and accountability. And I just want to keep bringing it home. The disparity study is the foundation that helps us to see the information on the background so that we can make informed decisions. And again, want to reiterate, all that information is public. There are different sessions that we hold throughout the year. Many of our information is public. So as you look at that information and you have questions, we'll be willing to help you. And because we each buy different things, how the disparity study impacts us will be different, because I think I'm the only one that's doing airfield pavement out here. But those type of contractors will really want to do opportunities, at the airport. And, NDOT has the roadways. I mean, the city usually has vertical and architecture and engineering. We have some of that, but just understand all things are not the same. So take the time to understand. Processes are similar, but different. Needs are different.
Can I just add something? What you all are doing at the airport right now isn't just present us your bid, but come to us so that we can help you with your bid.
Yes.
Now that, once again, is intentional. That's going above and beyond what I think normally folks would expect, but that is expectation for all of our agencies, departments, and municipal corporations.
Thank you. And again, that goes to the resources. You talked about education. We're not there just to be the police. We're there to help
Correct.
you navigate. And I think you said you want to start with education, and then if people aren't following the process, then
Education twice then.
Yep, then comes the
Then
compliance.
compliance.
So leverage the education. So we do have a question from an owner of a cardiac ultrasound company that has contracts with medical facilities to get patients' exams completed through mobile or office visits. They are trying to bridge racial disparities in diagnostic prevention in our healthcare community, and is trying to figure out how do they get access to resources for expansion. And I don't know if any of you have advice, and then I can also give my 2 cents from the peanut gallery.
Sure. One of the first things that I will always ask is, are you certified with us? If you're certified with us, then you should be receiving subcontracting and contracting opportunities from us on a weekly basis. If you're not certified, you can still subscribe and work through the certification process. Why that's easier and more convenient is because you don't have to go through the state's website where all these bids are obviously public. Holly, you mentioned many times that all of this information is public because we are government agencies. We post everything online. So when you subscribe with us, you can just receive that information. And one of the things that we always hear is, well, I receive all the bidding notifications. That's not what I do. That's not what my company does. But there are so many still contracting opportunities that you can look at the RFP or request for proposal, request for services, request for information or quotation, and there may be something, a contracting opportunity for you or a subcontracting opportunity for you. So I cannot tell you exactly if there's a cardiac need right now, but I can tell you that there's state obviously has a lot of medical facilities. We have Department of Corrections, we have Department of Health. So it will be very, very difficult to believe that there would not be an opportunity for you.
And then I would also back it up with maybe contacting Marion County Health and hospital, as they might be a good resource for that person's services.
And I think that's a great recommendation. The other thing I would mention is, I know oftentimes companies want to get a one-off meeting with someone to talk about how they could help, and sometimes can't happen. Leverage the outreach events. I can share that at many of the outreach events, I see everybody at this table, but I also see them bring the decision makers with them. And so if you see an outreach being hosted by the city or the state or the airport, and I know Shield actually does their own diversity event, the hospitals do as well, is to reach out. So when you call, sometimes it's not about just saying, here's what I can sell, but how do I get access to the people who will make the decision? And it's a process. It's not a immediate,
Right.
you make a call. There is a need, there has to be an opportunity, but you don't want to wait till there's an opportunity to start the conversation. You want to start networking. So leverage the outreach that we do, ask. And sometimes you may come to the airport and you say, what I sell, I know you all don't want. Do you know somebody? All of the supplier diversity professionals work together. So if I don't, I can help facilitate an introduction. So don't be afraid to say, okay, the hospital's not doing anything, but the city is. Go there and they maybe can help you make that connection. So leverage the outreach and development that anybody has. And also don't be afraid to reach out directly. Because again,
Absolutely.
the individuals that you want to have direct contact with, I bet you if you go to their website, you can get to
Yep.
somebody.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just say this too, in terms of the procurement, we've got a controller who is 100% on board. The mayor has basically said, we're going to get this done. And the office of the controller, who handles the procurement is fully engaged in this, wants to make sure that it happens. But I think like all of us, if there is a hiccup, we need to know about it, because otherwise we're not able to identify it and get it done right. So as you're saying, reach out. If there are issues, make sure that folks do reach out and explain, I have a hiccup. The same way as the example earlier, the issue at the airport, it was going to the chairman of like the board out there, the guy who managed, the project, to say, we want to get involved and we want to have capacity. And they did the things that we're talking about doing right now. They put their hands into it and helped to craft something that we could walk away with, I think, with a lot of pride and dignity.
Awesome. Well, I've got a two-part question for you, Maya. Specifically, is there highlights that you can share about the findings from the state of Indiana's disparity study in 2020? And if there are any key recommendations you'd like to share?
I thought you never asked. That is one of the things that we talked about for at least during these 6 months, at least 6 times. We had 3 disparity study specific outreach webinars. We talked about it at the Governor's Commission on Supplier Diversity meetings, which we've had 3 by now. So if you have not listen to any of those webinars, we have those links available for you. Please visit our website and we can go through the details there. But Holly, you asked for highlights, so I will try to make sure that I only talk about highlights. Well, first of all, Disparity Study 2020 was pretty consistent with Disparity Study 2015 because we do them every 5 years per our law. And then there was significant disparities for all minority groups as well as white women. This year's disparity study, or last year's rather, 2020, was the first study where we also added veteran-owned businesses. While Indiana veteran-owned small business is governed by other statute, we still wanted to add the availability and to see what the availability and participation was for the veterans, but it's still at 3%. So a disparity study found significant disparities for all minority groups and white women. It also found that key takeaways were that there were on the goals that didn't really the state didn't really go with lowest responsive and responsible and only went with lowest bid. The numbers were really low, which it would be in our case public works bids. It also found that there were smaller pool of vendors that were constantly being utilized on state of Indiana contracts. You spoke about it, talked about it, Holly. And while there's nothing wrong with it, we do want to make sure that there's equity and equal distribution of wealth as well. So I know for all of us here, we know what the disparity study is, but it is also important to notice that there's this little formula that sometimes confuses people. What is disparity versus parity, right? And I'm going to use my cheat sheet because it's important to know that dollars received divided by dollars available times 100 equals disparity. And anything below 80 cents is significant disparity. So we're talking about 80 cents per minority or a woman owned business that were not given, and the availability was there. So this is how significant this study is, and this is how significant it is for us to see that we are talking about 80 cents per dollar that were not given to minority and women owned businesses. And then the other part of the study, Holly, you mentioned availability. So how do we know that those dollars could have been going to minority and women? We know that by the study, as it showed that there was availability. So it was a lot of discussion and the subcommittee groups and subcommittee meetings with the disparity study experts and the researchers, because we wanted to make sure that now we revised and established the goals that were tied to the disparity study. And I always say we have two masters because I know you can't serve two masters, but we kind of do. We have Governor's Commission on Supplier Diversity that is responsible, and that's one of their roles by law to establish these goals. And we are also housed under Indiana Department of Administration. So there was a lot of collaborative effort with the researcher, with the Governor's Commission on Supplier Diversity, as well as IDOA, to see what those figures would look like, what the goals would look like now after this disparity study. And we looked at three things. Base figures were the figures that was availability. And then we also plugged in two things, which was past participation of minority and women businesses, which means are they ready, willing, and able to participate on state contracts, as well as business ownership barriers. And Adrian, you named all of them, and that was spot on, because those were the challenges that disparity study and the researchers found as well within the state of Indiana: accessing capital, bonding. So those were all the issues with bonding, with business ownership. And based on that, we revised the goals, and the goals as of July 1st were increased. July 1st, 2021, the state is operating by new goals. So in construction, actually that didn't change. It was 7% for minority, 5% for women, and veterans stayed 3% across the board. So we divide industries by three areas: construction, professional services, goods and supplies. So construction is still 7 for M, 5 for W. Then for the professional services, we used to have 8 and 8 for M now, and 11 for W. And then goods and services, we used to have 4 and 9, and now it's 8 for minority and 13 for W, or women. So these are the new goals that the state is operating and will be operating by as of July 1st, 2021, until another review by Governor's Commission on Diversity. And Joe, going back to your point about education, that is very, very important. We still find many agencies and individuals, as well as vendor community, that do not only know that there are goals, but they don't know we exist as a supplier diversity division. So we are starting weekly sessions, training sessions for all state agencies under IDOA purview to, one, educate them about these new goals, and two, to tell them we're here and this is who you go to and go through when you're changing subcontractor participation. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Education, one, and it is very important. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know, right? And now they can say they don't know because we are literally training everyone with the new goals. Another finding, but going back to the public works, was that we are now starting to partner with IDOA's Public Works Department. And why that division, and why that important? Through lowest bidder and disparity study found that the goals were not consistently not being met. And now there will be project specific promotion, which has never done before. And I know city always does that. And it's like, what's the big deal? We always do that, like Criminal Justice Center, New Market Square, right? The JW, or all these things were being built, but state had never done that before. So after this, and I think Sheila will be also there, they will start talking about Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. There's a new building that's coming up. So now we will be spotlighting project-specific goals as well. And then another thing that we did already after the disparity study, all the purchases, so how IDOA works is purchases over $75,000 go through us. Purchases under $75,000, agencies have their own purchasing authority. So now they have to get at least one, they must have and obtain at least one bid from a minority woman or a veteran-owned business. So that's a huge change for the state to operate under smaller dollar value, which had never done before. And then subcommittee is looking at these disparity study findings that we're meeting every day. And there is a list of the frequently used vendors. So we're looking with the subcommittee to see how those vendors who have had more opportunities on the state contracts can mentor maybe the ones that have not had a chance, and what are the industries that these vendors were being most frequently used for. So huge change for, not just in the mindset, because we always say it's not just the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do.
Yes.
Because you are distributing that wealth, and also it is equity and certainly inclusion, and those communities have those spillover effect. You talked about one vendor who, how do I get to that point? How do I become the prime who consistently meets and exceeds the goals? So that's what we hope that state agencies will start doing now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for, I think that clarification on a couple of things was really important, but just understanding what the disparity index is. And I just want to restate that is that when you look at the availability and then you look at the dollars that are utilized, the goal is not saying it's 100, that every time we're using 100, we're looking at 80% based on availability. And so total dollars spent, availability is a sub of total. So I just want to make sure people understand. And I think President Ocelot, you talked about being reasonable. So the disparity study makes it reasonable. And I think the more people understand what we're really looking at to try to achieve is, of the people that are available, we're trying to give at least 80% of them an opportunity. And that takes an account of sometimes there are issues that won't allow them to take advantage of the opportunity. So I just want to make sure people take time to understand the data. And this goes back to the intent of what we're trying to be intentional about. So we do have a question. It says, I have a transportation company. Who do I speak with? And I'll lead with saying, if you look at the different agency sites, and I know a lot of times people say it's they're black holes, they've evolved over time where, and I think, Joe, you could talk about how procurement agencies actually go to the lists that have been established that show who's trying to do work. But the question I always challenge people with is make sure you're asking, do you buy what I'm selling? Because you can have a great conversation with someone, but if they don't buy with what you sell or that isn't established, it's not going to lead to a potential opportunity or a contract award. And I don't know if you guys, anyone has anything they want to add to who do I speak with?
I would say, send me an email at joseph.lee@indy.gov and let's have the conversation, certified, what type of transportation, have that conversation and see if I can't lead Joshua in some kind of direction.
Yep.
So joseph.lee@indy.gov.
And I'm going to take a point of privilege as a municipal company. Indigo is transportation. So not knowing the detail of what
Right.
you're trying to provide. Indigo is one that just popped out depending on the type of transportation. It could be any of us, but if you put more information in, just like we said, we'll share with you our contact information. Any details you put in the chat will be shared with this whole group, and the appropriate individuals can follow up with you. All righty. got a kind of question for Joe and Adrian to get kind of together. And it's specifically to the city about what measures have been taken to ensure that Prime, so you might be able to share from a Prime perspective, are fulfilling utilization obligations. And is there anything different from what you've done in the past?
So I think from my perspective, it is that we're asking questions. That has not been done in the past. We did not have the manpower or the woman power to ask the questions, and now we do. And so asking the questions, doing the deep dive, what have you done? Where are you at? Which is what I keep saying, is that's what's changed. And that's the start of holding people accountable. And you know, one of the things that I say is, you know, when they say, you know, we want to hire someone from California because they do this specialty work. Well, we got people here that can do this. Well, they can't get bonded. Well, how about you help them with bonding?
Right.
How about you? I mean, this was one that really kind of just made me lose my mind. Was we on a project with the city, there was a requirement for bonding for landscaping. And one of our certified XP landscapers calls me up and says to me, Joe, we've never had a bond in all the years that I've been in business. He goes, we plant grass and trees and shrubs, and if they die, we go out and we replace them. So why should I have to have this bond that I cannot afford, that I have never had to have before? So just asking those questions, breaking down those barriers of bonding, not so much insurance, because I don't recommend that, but you know, bonding and contracts that aren't 400 pages long.
Right. Seen it all.
That has to we have to figure something out. And so, you know, we are holding folks accountable, but we're also trying to get to some of those things that you talked about, Adrian, was, you know, this is the way that has always been done. This is, you know, 2020 is behind us.
Right.
We need to take full advantage of that. We need to dig deep, and 2021 on, you know, we need to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing because we know that our program, I have seen it when I worked in purchasing, it has helped grow businesses. But we have to give people that chance, and we have to stop with the smoke and mirrors, which is another one of my favorite phrases. You know, stop with the smoke and mirrors. Let's just put it out there. This is what it is. And why did you not work with this XPE? And so we need help from places like Shield Sexton to help make that happen. So.
No, absolutely. And we mentioned good faith efforts, and that's something that I'll say it definitely pays dividends, is a prime contractor having to show their good faith efforts and not just checking boxes, but actually being able to really list out in extensive detail all of the efforts that have been made to give minority firms a fair shake and a shot to succeed on any project. So I would say that we are seeing that from the city, and I'll say that also it is paying dividends for sure.
Yeah, and you know, the one other thing that I will throw in there is, and I've just lost my train of thought. Please forgive me. Yeah, it is gone. Sorry.
That's okay. That's
It'll come
okay.
back.
Well, then I'll plug in some of the numbers while you are thinking, Joe. I talked about the importance of certification, and I just wanted to give you some data that our researchers for Disparity Study 2020 looked at the $1.4 billion from state contracts, and out of $1.4 billion, only 12.9% went to minority and women businesses, which is $177 million. And to white women, it was 7.9%, Asian American 1.5%, Black American 3.3%, Hispanic American 0.1%, and Native American 0.1%. So this is the significant disparities that I was talking about. for all minority groups as well as women. But I just wanted to run some of the numbers by you that out of these vendors, because disparity studies look at beyond certification, they look at availability in the entire marketplace, whether regardless of their certification, right? And then out of 7.9% for white women, 4.4 were certified with us. Out of 1.5 for Asian American, 1.4% were certified. Out of 3.3% Black American, 3.1% were certified vendors. Out of 0.1% for Hispanic and Native Americans, 0.1 were certified with us. So that's just the importance of certification. Again, it's not the guarantee that you will get contracts, but it is certainly there and it will get you there. It's one of the added tools that you should probably always have in your toolbox. So I just could not
I appreciate
not
that.
plug that in.
Well, I think the key thing, because we've got to close, we've got about 2 minutes. So the reason that is very important is that's access.
Absolutely.
So you can go to events, but you can't be everywhere all the time. And for small minority women and veteran business, time is money. So by being in these databases, we can find you. And so it is so important. That's what gives us access so that we can give you opportunity. And I want to keep saying opportunity. The whole premise behind a disparity study is how we match opportunity based on availability. And so if we don't know you're out there, we can't give you an opportunity. So help us help you. Make sure you get certified, come out to our outreach events. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially if you think they're smoke and mirrors or they're bad actors. We really want to make this a better place so that we can have a positive impact for our entire community. So I want to thank each of you. I saw some of the comments, so I'm taking a point of privilege again. They said they appreciated our candor and our openness. So I want to thank each of you for not being scripted and sharing what you really think and how we're going to partner together to do better, moving past the disparity study and not just focus on what we would like to see our city look like, but actually partnering to be intentional about making it happen. So President Ocelot, Maya, Joe, Adrian, thank you so much for participating. And Joe, in the session, if you want additional information, it will be out on indianablackexpo.com. And again, if you need anything to tell us, put it out in the chat and we will send information back out to everybody. So in closing, I know COVID changed things, but remember, we are still celebrating Indiana Black Expo for their more than 50 years of commitment to our community and specifically minority women and veteran-owned businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Holly.
all very much.
You did a great job. Thank you.